Oh man, this is like Jell-O. This is crazy. I'm always looking for new ways to help people make better briskets, whether it's making them juicier, more moist, better bark, better smoky flavor. But what I've consistently found throughout all of my experiments with briskets is that these little tips and tricks might help you increase the quality of your brisket, the taste, the tenderness, the bark by maybe like 10%, a little bit, but it pales in comparison with just upgrading to the next grade of beef. So for example, if you upgrade from select to choice grade beef, then it's gonna be 1,000% better. And then if you upgrade from choice to prime, it's gonna be way better. And then if you go even higher than that to Wagyu, it's gonna be insanely better. And it doesn't even matter what tips or tricks or cooking techniques you use. It just has more fat content in those upper grades of beef, and it results in a better brisket. But I'm not satisfied with giving that advice. I want to be able to tell people to get a select brisket and then do X, Y, Z, and it's going to taste as good as a prime brisket, as good as a Wagyu brisket. And most people that have cooked a lot of briskets will say that's impossible, and I'm inclined to agree with them based on everything that I've experienced with briskets, but it's not enough for me. I can't quit this journey to turn a lower quality brisket into an extremely high quality brisket. I sometimes feel like I'm an old time alchemist or something trying to turn dirt into gold. And if you guys are thinking, what's the point of all of this? Well, in addition to saving a bunch of money by buying a select brisket or a choice brisket, which is a lower quality of fat content than a prime or a Wagyu, if we're driving all this demand for Wagyu briskets and super high fat content prime briskets, and everyone feels like they can only cook a good brisket if they get the highest quality, then it becomes a barrier to entry for the average person to get into barbecue and feel like they're making a really high quality brisket that's way better than you can get in the restaurant, because that's what you should be able to produce at home when you're putting all this care and skill into one brisket as opposed to mass producing them. So all of that is to say that we collectively as a barbecue community need to figure out a way to make those lower grades of beef, especially with beef brisket, they need to taste, they need to look, they need to be as acceptable as the higher grades of brisket like prime and Wagyu. Otherwise, we're going to get into a weird situation where only the rich people who can afford prime and Wagyu are looking down at all people that can only afford selects and saying they don't know how to barbecue because their brisket looks dry or doesn't look the same way that theirs looks. So it's a big problem, and that's what I'm trying to solve with all these experiments. So now I'm going to get off my high horse and I'm going to get into the content of the video, which is why you guys are here. The question I want to answer in this video is, will injecting beef gelatin into a brisket make it more tender, more juicy than a brisket that hasn't been injected with beef gelatin, or more specifically, that has been injected with water? I got this idea because I know that what makes brisket so good is all of that interconnective tissue called collagen in between the individual muscle strands in a brisket. Once we get that brisket to a certain temperature and leave it there for a certain amount of time, all that collagen starts rendering out and it starts transforming into gelatin, which is that super silky smooth liquid that melts out of the brisket and it just coats your tongue and it makes brisket taste awesome. There's basically three types of liquid that make a brisket awesome. There's water, which comes from the actual moisture content of the beef and any injection that you add. Then there's the intramuscular fat, which renders down and it creates an awesome flavor. It creates that moisture that we want to see in the brisket. And then the third thing is the melted down collagen and interconnective tissue, which is gelatin in liquid form. And that also helps create that glistening, moist look that we look for in briskets, and it helps create that awesome, luxurious mouthfeel that just coats your whole tongue when you eat a piece of really well-cooked, moist brisket. So I've tried injections before, adding water to my brisket. I've tried adding fat. I've tried lacing fat inside of my brisket and see if that improves the quality. And now I want to test the third type of liquid, which is gelatin, and see if that's going to improve the moisture retention and the quality and the taste of a brisket. So this is a choice grade brisket that I'm going to be using for this experiment. I'm going to make a notch that separates the brisket in two. On the left-hand side is where I'm going to inject the gelatin injection, and on the right-hand side is where I'm going to inject water. The reason I'm injecting water on the right-hand side and not just leaving it as it is because we could just inject the left-hand side with gelatin and it would be way more juicy because we just put a bunch of moisture in it. And then we'd look at the right-hand side, which had no injection, and it would have less moisture because we didn't put anything into it. But what we really want to test is whether gelatin is better at producing a juicier brisket than plain water is. So that's why we're using the water side as a control. Now, the reason I put the dividing line where it is because usually the flat dries out a lot faster than the point. So my thinking is that if the gelatin injected side of the brisket shows that it's visibly more juicy than the water injected side, which is usually more juicy during a normal cook, then that tells us that the gelatin injected side is actually really doing something. And also, we're still leaving a good portion of the flat, which is underneath the point, with that water injection. So when we're comparing the water injected portion of the flat to the gelatin injected portion of the flat, we're actually comparing apples to apples. So after I'm done injecting, I'm applying a basic rub. It's basically 1/3 pepper, 1/3 kosher salt, 1/3 garlic, so SPG. To cook it, I fired up my Traeger to 150 degrees Fahrenheit. I set the brisket fat side down to protect it from the heat source of the Traeger and to give it a little bit of extra smoke because pellet grills don't impart a lot of smoke. I used an amazing pellet tray to add some more smoke, so I just filled it with pellets. I let it burn for about 15 minutes and then I put it onto the Traeger, and that just burns for about 4 to 8 hours and adds a lot more smoky flavor. After about 4 hours, I took a look at the brisket, and at this point, the bark was getting pretty set up, so now is the time when it's safe to give it a little spritz on the edges and just make sure that it doesn't get too crispy in that bark formation. Unfortunately, about an hour after I did that, I hit a huge snag. My Traeger app told me that there was a flame out and the temperatures were plummeting in the Traeger, so I ran out and I checked it and I realized that I just forgot to add more pellets. It was a super cold day and it was burning through pellets like crazy. So that lost me about an hour of cook time, and the temperature of the meat started decreasing by about 5 to 10 degrees, which was unfortunate. So I had to put more pellets in the Traeger. I had to get it started up again, and I lost probably about an hour, but then I got it up to temps again, and my brisket internal temperature started rising. At about the 8-hour mark, my brisket hit 165 degrees internal, but what I was really looking for was the color of the brisket. The color was getting really nice, so it was at the perfect color that I wanted it at, so I took it off. I wrapped it tightly in foil and added about 1/3 of a cup of beef stock to it just for some added moisture. And then it went back on the Traeger at 250 degrees Fahrenheit for another 3 hours. I probed it at that point and it was probing like butter. It was around 203 to 205 degrees internal. So I pulled it out, rested it, and then I started the experiment. All right, this brisket has been resting for 1 hour. It's about down to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the perfect temperature for slicing. And now it is time to take a look at what we have. I'm excited. This is gonna be a lot of fun. Nice, nice bark. This looks awesome. Look at that bark. You can scrape your fingernail on it and see that it's still really set, even though we put it in the foil. So this is a really nice brisket. I'm really happy with it so far. I'm just gonna take it out of the foil now. And it's cold enough that I can just handle it with my bare hands. Oh man, this is like Jell-O. This is crazy. All right, I don't want this to fall apart. There we go. See if we can hit it a little bit. Look at how jiggly that is. That's the wobbly we want. So I'll just take my Dalstrong slicing knife here. I just got this knife from Dalstrong. They were gracious enough to give it to me for free, and I'm happy to use it in my videos because it makes slicing brisket a lot easier. This is a super sharp knife. I've used it before in a video and it sliced through a turkey like a hot knife through butter. So I'm going to start slicing from this edge here, and as you guys will recall, I injected all the way from about here, so a little bit of the point muscle underneath. This is the flat right here, this is the point muscle. I started right here, and we went all the way down like that. You can actually see it's a little bit over here actually. You can see that original mark where I cut to signify where I was injecting the gelatin, and it's exactly right there. So this is the gelatin part of the brisket, and this is the water injected part of the brisket. So the obvious thing to do right now is just to slice it right down the middle. This, oh my God, this slices so easily. This is crazy. Okay, so we don't normally do this, but this is for the sake of science, right? So we've sliced with the grain, and this is what it looks like. We've got the point muscle and the flat right here, and that was injected with water. And we'll look at that later, but what we're gonna look at right now is the part that was injected with the gelatin, because that's what we're all here for. So let's take the part that has the least amount of the point muscle on it. So that's right about there, and we'll slice it against the grain. So this is the part that was the furthest away from the middle of the brisket, so it's the exterior edge of the brisket. We'll give that a slice. So here's the first slice that we're gonna look at. This is usually the driest slice that we have on the brisket, and there's still quite a bit of moisture in there actually. I've cooked a few briskets that are a lot drier than this on the very edge piece. So that looks pretty nice. So we'll put that to the side. We'll take another slice. This definitely had some gelatin injected into it at some point. Can we see that gelatin? I mean, it looks really tender and juicy. It looks like it's delicious, like it's still really bendy. That's a smaller piece, but it's still bending. So that's pretty good. And usually these first couple slices I don't even show in my videos because they're always kind of dry. Anyone who's ever cooked a brisket, usually those outer pieces are a little bit drier than the inner ones. It's got a lot of moisture left in it and it looks good. Let's keep going down. Next slice in. Looks pretty similar to the last few that we've done. Nice smoke ring. It's bending on my finger. Still really juicy. It's pretty good. Let's keep on going. Now let's go a couple slices in. I'm just gonna continue to slice with this Dowel Strong knife, which is crazy good. I've never sliced a brisket this easily before. This is a nice slicing knife. So we've sliced a couple more slices in. Now we'll take a look at this slice here. Again, really juicy. It's got a lot of moisture left in it. I mean, this looks good. It's got a nice smoke ring, a nice fat layer. It looks like it's got some nice moisture retention. And again, guys, this is the gelatin injected piece that we are slicing into right now. Take a bit of a larger slice. And I'll give you guys a close-up. It looks really good. And now that we're making larger slices, you can really tell that that is bending a lot. And let me show you guys this. You can easily pull this apart. It's like nothing. It's a perfectly cooked brisket. We'll just keep on slicing. And now that we get more into the point portion, obviously you can tell there's a lot more moisture because that point has a lot more fat. So look at that. That is a ton of moisture. That's crazy. But what we're really concerned about here is the flat muscle, right? So we look at the flat. This is the most inner portion of the brisket, and if you look at it, I mean, it's still got a ton of moisture in it, which is, I mean, that's a lot of moisture for me. I don't know. I've cooked this exact same brisket before, the exact grade, the exact same way, and it did not have this amount of moisture in it. So right now, this is telling me that the gelatin injection is actually doing something. Okay, now let's take a look at the part that was not injected with the gelatin. What I'm gonna do actually to keep things fair is I'm gonna separate the point from the flat. So here's the flat right here, and I'm just gonna take a cut all the way down and just separate the whole thing. So we'll move the point to the side for now, and we'll just take a look at the flat. This is the part of the flat that was not injected with the gelatin. So we'll do a couple slices. Take one from the middle here. Now, if we take a look at it, you can tell where the point muscle starts right there. That's where all the fat is. But you can see that it looks actually really similar to the flat that we just carved up. So not a lot of difference up here in terms of moisture retention. If we pull it apart, still the same amount of resistance that we got in the flat. So I'll show you guys really close up. So this is where the point is attached to the flat, and obviously that's going to add a lot of moisture. But if you just look at this portion right here, you can tell that it looks very similar to the flat that we just carved up. And actually, if you look at this, it actually looks a little bit drier, and that might be because it's been oxidizing for longer since I cut it up. But I mean, it looks like it does not have as much moisture. We're gonna squeeze that. So you guys be the judge. It looks pretty similar actually to the flat that we just carved up. So I'm not seeing much of a difference so far. Let's take a look at another piece of the flat that was not injected. This was just injected with water. It was not injected with gelatin. We'll squeeze it. So still a lot of moisture. Pull it apart. Still very similar to the flat. Now let's take another piece of the flat that was injected with the gelatin back here so we can take another look at it. So this has been oxidizing for a while. It's dried out a little bit, but still, if you squeeze it, it's still got quite a bit of moisture in it. And if we pull it apart, perfectly pulls apart. So now I'm gonna do a taste test. This is the part of the brisket that was injected with the gelatin. All right. This might seem weird to you, but I've eaten a lot of brisket before. I've eaten select brisket, and I've messed up a lot of select brisket, so it's super dry. I've eaten a lot of choice briskets. I've eaten prime. I've eaten Wagyu. And let me talk about this in terms of what a Wagyu brisket tastes like. When you taste a Wagyu brisket, you slice a slice off of the flat of a Wagyu brisket that's perfectly cooked, and it's got like what I can only describe as like a really luxurious mouthfeel. It's not only the fat in the Wagyu, it's like the extra amount of interconnective tissue that has rendered down into gelatin, all of the collagen in a Wagyu brisket that renders down, and that coats your tongue with all the saltiness, the smokiness, the meatiness, and it just feels awesome in your mouth. That's the only way I can describe a Wagyu brisket. And this is getting close to it. This is getting close to it with the gelatin injection. With all that extra gelatin we added, it feels similar to the way that a Wagyu brisket hits your palate. That's the only way I can describe it. So I think that the gelatin is adding something here. I think what we saw is that it looks very similar between the gelatin injected piece of the flat and the water injected piece of the flat. But I ate the water injected piece of the flat. Here's another piece here. This brisket's really good. And it looks visually like it's the same amount of moisture, but when I eat it, you can feel the dryness in your mouth. It's like all that water and moisture was squeezed out of it. It tastes very beefy. It tastes very smoky. It tastes, I can taste the salt and the garlic and the pepper. I taste a lot of pepper. And this is brisket to me. This is really good brisket. This is what I'm used to. This, with the gelatin injection, this is more like how Wagyu tastes, I think. Like, I think there's something to the gelatin. Adding that extra gelatin makes it taste more, it just makes it taste different. But at the end of the day, the one thing I could say from the results of this video is that I think that injecting your brisket with at least some amount of gelatin, I think it adds to it. My gut feeling is that it adds to it. Visually it doesn't, but taste-wise, I think I'm gonna keep doing this. It's like if you guys have ever made your own turkey soup before and you boil the carcass down for 5 to 6 hours or more, and you leave it in the fridge overnight and then you scrape the fat off and the rest of it is just pure gelatin that's been derived from that turkey carcass, then you'll know what I'm talking about. It's like that rich flavor that just elevates the taste of that turkey soup to an amazing level. And I think the same thing is happening in this brisket right now with that gelatin injection. So summarizing the results of the experiment, the gelatin injected portion of the brisket did not appear any more moist visibly than the water injected portion, but it did taste a lot better. I've cooked a lot of select and choice briskets before, and this just tastes a lot better, especially for the flat portion of the brisket. So I think there's something to the gelatin injection, and I'm gonna continue to incorporate a gelatin injection into my future briskets. It might not be a full gelatin injection. I might mix it with some beef stock or some other type of injection, but there's something to this, guys, and I'm gonna have to do some more experiments to find out exactly what it is. And if you guys are looking for another video on briskets, I've done a whole bunch. I'm gonna link a couple up here and up here, and you guys can check those out, and I'll see you in the next video.